I'd like to welcome you all here today for this special satsang with Nayaswami's Jyotish and Devi. I'd like to say a couple of words of introduction. Oh, but first, please turn your cell phones off. Double check, please. One of our favorite songs at Ananda is called Many Hands Make a Miracle. And it represents this journey that we've all had together, that we've all joined hands, both physically, but mentally, spiritually. Our hearts are one. And in this world today, that does seem like a miracle, doesn't it? But each of us, our hands all have different tasks to do as a practical matter. Some people serve in this department, some people serve in that department. For over 45 years, our friends here have served in the Serve Swamiji and the community at large department. Either one of those tasks would be sufficient to keep a person more than busy, but they have done both tasks. And in ways that we, each of us, we might dream that it was our dharma, but in fact, it was their dharma. And so you have carried for all of us that personal service, both to the community, but especially to Swamiji. And for that, we thank you dearly. We recognize it, and we appreciate it. Okay, so
thank you all for coming. You'll just have to bear with me if I cough from time to time. I have a little bronchitis, probably due to pollution and dust and something of that nature. So I'm not really ill, but I do cough quite a bit. So Devi and I want to talk this morning about our life with Swamiji and some of the lessons that we've learned, some of the adventures that we've been on. There was a very nice book written a few years ago by a friend of Ananda's. His name was Devi Mukherjee, and the book was titled Shaped by Saints. And it was an interesting title. It came from a realization that he had when he was relatively young. And he said that there are many influences in one's life, many things that create the life that one leads. But he wanted his life to be shaped by saints. And he went on a conscious quest to go and meet as many saints as he could meet. He spent a lot of time with Anandamoy Ma, for instance, and other saints. And then he became a very good friend of Swami Kriyananda's when Swamiji came here in 1958, came to India. And in 1958, he and Devi Mukherjee met at that time and became good friends and co-workers. But it's that concept here, shaped by saints. In fact, our life has been shaped by Swami Kriyananda. One could say shaped by a saint. And it's his consciousness that has given us a roadmap, given us the whole path for our life to follow. And I was thinking about it, and it actually turns out, when I think about it, to be something more subtle and actually deeper than it might seem on the surface. Usually when a person lists what they are in life, they listed, first of all, their name, and then all the initials after their name for their degree, MS, PhD, doctor of this, doctor of that, and then down the left side, all the board of supervisors or board of directors that they're a part of. And so basically what they do is they list all of their accomplishments. And Swamiji did that, but had others do it for him, and then it got buried. So occasionally he would do something called a curriculum vitae, which was all the accomplishments or all the things that he had done throughout his life. And that ran to like 20 pages or 25 pages of things that he'd done. But so he accumulated that, but then it was almost as if that was completely unimportant to him, and he just kind of put it somewhere on a shelf and never thought about it again. And when he would write a book, or when he would give a talk, especially we saw it when he wrote books, that very often there would be quite a long section in The Path, for instance, which is his autobiography. There would be a long section that had to do with his growing up, but especially his search for truth, his search for God. Then the pivotal point would be that he read the autobiography, took the next bus across the country, across America, met Master, and spent 3.5 years being trained by Master. And so that took him up to about age 24 or 25, something, 1948. So I don't want to do the math here, but 25 or 26. And then there would be a chapter or two basically saying, and then I did some other things with my life too. And I know that and I think Devi also, used to get a little frustrated, saying, well, why don't you write about all the things that you did after meeting Master? And he would do that, but not very much. And I was contemplating, I was meditating on that. Why would Swamiji have such importance on meeting Master and the training with Master, and then almost no importance about what he did after that? And that's because he put very, very little emphasis or importance on accomplishments. What he put importance on was the change of consciousness. And the great change of consciousness for him in this life came during his time with Master. And then what he did with that change of consciousness, that was not very important to him, but it was very, very important to all of us, because it was what he did with his changed consciousness that shaped our lives. And so it's a conundrum that I have wondered about. When Swamiji was coming across country after reading the book, The Autobiography of the Yogi, he said that he had two great desires, and that they were the great desires of his life. The first desire was to find God. And that, it's not as if he found God in the meeting with Master, but he satisfied the yearning for knowing how he was going to find God by meeting Master, because that guru-disciple relationship satisfied for him. It's almost as if Master gave him the implicit promise that if you do what I ask you to do, you will find God. And so Swamiji relaxed, in a sense, about that great yearning of his heart, because it's that yearning that drives all of us. You see, that yearning to find God is innate in the soul of each of us, because the soul knows that it's God, and it's the soul that has identified itself with this body and personality. But the soul isn't this body and personality. And so what this body and personality accomplishes is not very important to the soul. And it wasn't what Swami's body and personality accomplished wasn't very important to him. Isn't that odd? Because for most of us, the more we're locked in ego, the more important it becomes what we accomplish, and not only what we accomplish, but how much recognition we get from the world for those accomplishments. How much fame we get, how much authority we get, how much money we get because of those things that we accomplish. And for Swamiji, these things were not very important to him. He didn't care about fame. He said it was a burden. He didn't care about money. He never cared about money. It was astounding how little he cared about that. And other aspects of all he cared about really was finding God, and then the second aspect was sharing God. And so when we met him, when I met him, the first day that I met him, he introduced himself, and then he said, I'm doing a project. Would you like to help me with that project? Well, that project was the second part of his two great desires in life. One was to find God, and the other was to share his whatever he had realized with other people. And so the very first words out of his mouth, other than identifying himself, hello, I'm Swami Kriyananda, I introduced myself. Then he said, I'm working on a project. Do you want to help? And I said yes. And he was sending out little brochures about upcoming classes. So what he was doing was he was informing people about the opportunity for them to come, so he would share his realization with them. Now, I've made a little joke out of it, saying that he asked me, he said, I'm doing a project. Would you like to help? And I said yes. And I've made a little joke saying I didn't realize that that project would still be going on 45 years later. But that project is in fact still going on 45 years later, because all Swami really wanted to do in this life was to share God with people, to find God and to share God. And Ananda has been shaped by that consciousness. All of us have been shaped by that consciousness. And the more we become shaped by that purity of that consciousness, the clearer and more powerful and more uplifted and blissful our lives become. Because especially toward the end, Swamiji would sometimes say, I'm in so much bliss, I can hardly stand it, or I can hardly speak. And that bliss comes from the purity of that consciousness of all we want is to know God and to share God. Another way of putting it is that life comes down to a very, very simple formula. There are only two goals. One is moksha and the other is seva. And when life begins to purify around those two goals, moksha, seva, then everything else, all the other things that we were hoping to achieve through all those accomplishments and all the getting from all those accomplishments that never happen, when life comes back down to the simple moksha seva formula, then we achieve everything. We achieve a sense of bliss, we achieve a sense of fulfillment, we achieve a sense of purpose, we achieve everything, just a contentment. Now, after I met Swamiji, so we went in, I was with my brother-in-law at the time, we went in and we put little mailing stickers on envelopes and put the little brochure in these envelopes, and then they were stamped and sent out in the mail so that people would know about upcoming classes and so that they could attend. Then we went on a picnic in Golden Gate Park, this old place in San Francisco. And at that picnic in Golden Gate Park, Swamiji talked about what he has talked about over and over and over again through his entire life, which was his time with Master. He talked about how he talked a little bit about how he met Master, because we were just meeting him, I was just meeting him. How he had met Master, because he hadn't written his book, The Path, or The New Path, about his autobiography. So he was telling us the story about having read the autobiography and then meeting Master, and because we were having a picnic lunch, he was telling us about what the qualities of some of the foods that we were eating. Now all of this I had read the autobiography of the yogi, but it was just so entrancing to me, so attractive. And as I look back, it wasn't so much the information that was attractive. You know, you could read in a book, and in fact I have read in Master's lessons the different qualities of various fruits. Cherries create joy, bananas humility, and so on. So you can read in lessons and get the information about qualities of fruits. But information, that's not what changes your life. Our heads are full of information. What changes our life is what touches our heart. And so what Swamiji was talking about was basically his enormous love and appreciation for Master, and how much Master had meant to him, and how much Master had trained him, and how much Master. So it was all about Master. And in lecture after lecture after lecture, Swamiji basically taught what Master talked about: meeting Master, being with Master, Master awakening, loving him. And that's because that's what he gave to all of us, that's what he fed all of us. That's what has shaped our life. For those of us who have been a part of Ananda, especially for a longer and longer period of time, that single-minded concentration on the spiritual path, on doing those things, on finding those people, on doing the activities that help to make us realize that we're one with God. That is, one could say, the whole of the life for us who are long-time deep disciples. It was the whole of the life for Swamiji, the whole of meaning of life for Swamiji. And if you look at it also as how many thousands, tens of thousands, or millions of lives we have led, and in each one of those lives, we've accomplished this, or we've accomplished that, we've done this, we've done that, we've married, we haven't married, we have had children, we haven't had children. By the time you accumulate all of that, what we did in those lives really kind of disappears. The individual life disappears. We can't remember our individual past lives. Krishna says to Arjuna in the Gita, the difference between us, O Arjuna, is I remember my past lives, but you do not. And so Krishna could remember all of that. None of us probably, at least with any clarity, can remember our past lives. So what does it matter what we accomplished in that life, or the life before it, where we lived in that life, whether we had 5 children or 2 children in that life, whether we attained learning or didn't attain learning in that life, whether we were famous or not famous in that life. What does it matter? It's all like a dream that we had and have now forgotten. The only thing that we retain from all of that past lives are the tendencies we bring into this life. And gradually, the only tendency that matters is the desire to know God. Because that is the tendency that we're all trying to develop more and more deeply, so that basically the only thing that is important becomes that desire to find God. When that happens, then God reveals himself, and it's as if that is the conclusion, the goal of all of those millions of lifetimes anyway. And so Swamiji, in a sense, said, why go through another lifetime crowing about the things that don't matter, crowing about those accomplishments? Yes, I've got to do something. I've got to work hard. I've got to try to use my mind and my creativity, and I've got to do all of that. But what's important is not accomplishing that, but realizing that I'm one with God. And as we begin to realize that we're one with God, then a strange thing happens. We see that we don't accomplish anything. We've never accomplished anything. All that pride about what we've done and who we've become and how much money we've made and how many degrees we have after our name and how many board of directors we have down the left side of the sheet, none of it matters, because we were never doing it anyway. And if it matters, then we're in delusion. And if it doesn't matter, maybe we're still in delusion, but at least we're beginning to wake up. So that quality of Swamiji's, that the only thing that was important to him was finding God, was the principal thing that he gave to us. That was the principal food. And again he talked about his relationship with Master. He wanted to be known only as a disciple. He didn't want to be world prominent. He did, of course, achieve a certain amount of notoriety and fame and so on, because someone of his accomplishments, how could it be other? But he did not do his work in order to become famous. In fact, it was a kind of a unfortunate side effect of doing his work. He did his work because he wanted to please his guru. He wanted to do whatever Master taught. We went to a movie with Swamiji on the life of Mother Teresa. And after that movie, he came out and he said the one line in there that was the most important line of the whole movie, he said most people won't even recognize, that won't remember it was said, won't recognize that it was important. But it was when the reporter asked Mother Teresa, why do you do what you do? Why do you serve the poorest of the poor? Why do you lead the life that you lead? And Mother Teresa's answer was, because Jesus came to me and told me to do this. And that was Swami's life. Swami formed his life. His life was shaped by his meeting with Master and by what Master told him to do. Master told him to write, to edit, and to lecture. And he said that, Swamiji later said, Master certainly and also encouraged him in communities. He said, but he didn't tell him specifically that that was his life's work, because it was too early. Swami was too young for that part. But writing, lecturing, and editing. If Master had told Swami, I want you to go to the Himalayas and live in a cave and not go into silence and not do anything else in this lifetime, Swami would have not done any of these things that seem so important to the rest of us. He would have simply followed his guru's instruction. He would have gone to the Himalayas, lived in a cave, not spoken to anyone, and no one would even have known that he led a life, or only a few people would. But Master was asking Swamiji. There had been a long relationship, many lifetimes, between the relationship of Swami and Master. So Swamiji had been Master's son as a king of England. He had been Master's son as a king of Spain. And he had... someone forgot. So when Master came into this lifetime, he was leading a life in such a way that he wouldn't have a physical son, but he needed a spiritual son. In each of those lifetimes, Swami played the same role. Master started something, and Swami continued it. And in this lifetime, Master was a monk. He didn't have any physical son, but he needed a spiritual son. And so Swami came into this lifetime in order to be Master's spiritual son. Master started a big world mission, and Swamiji continued it. But if Master said that in 200 years he was going to have a life in the Himalayas with just a few devotees, if Swami is there, then Swami will live this life in the Himalayas. Because the outer accomplishments, see, are not important. All that is important is the relationship between the soul and God. Now, we have been shaped by that. And over again, through my lifetime, through Deviji's lifetime, through Vijay's lifetime, those of us who've been with Swamiji, others here who have been with Swamiji, over and over we have been given basically the teaching from him that what you do is not very important. What you become through what you do, that's important. How much you love God, that's important. How much you attune your consciousness to the consciousness of the Guru, that's important. Swami must have told us 50 or 100 times the simple teaching that Master would give lots and lots of teachings. He would give all of these lectures. He would give all of these public programs. But when he was, and in those lectures he would give techniques, he would give different ways of living, he would give lectures on relationships and on finances and on past lives and on will Jesus incarnate again, and hundreds of lectures. But when he was with the devotees, he didn't give them much in terms of teaching. He said, be in tune with me. Be quiet and be in tune with me. When Master would go with his devotees, most of the time he wouldn't let them talk. He'd just say, be quiet. Listen to the silence. That's where you'll hear God. And so it was almost as if his work was giving out all of these teachings, but when he settled in his own vibration, it was just communion, inner communion with God. And Swamiji would often tell us that the example that Master said to the devotees, and the deeper the devotee was, the more Master would say to that devotee, just be in tune. Be in tune. And everything else follows from that attunement. And so that was one of the ways that Swami shaped us. Now, I can apply that in our own life. We have had, I don't know how many classes with Swamiji, how many lectures, and if you include also all of the things like videos that he's done on Gita and so on, I would not be surprised that we've had easily 2,000 classes with Swamiji. And yet those classes are openly available for everyone in the world. Most of them were recorded. Anyone can watch those classes. And often Devi and I are kind of, someone will say, oh, you were so lucky you were with Swami and he was teaching you personally all this time. He didn't. I don't think there were 5 times in our life when he sat us down or we asked him questions that were just for ourselves, and he gave those answers. He gave these general teachings, but then our real training was by watching what he did. It was not by him telling us, it was by watching him. So he would say, love God and love others. Same teaching as Jesus Christ. Love God and love others. And that teaching he would give publicly. Love Master, be in tune with Master. Then we would watch him in his daily life, and it's not like he would come and tell us again what he'd already said publicly. He would just do what he was telling people to do. He would say, be in tune with Master, and then he wouldn't kind of tell us personally, be in tune with Master. He'd already told us. He would just demonstrate how you be in tune with Master. So we would see him writing, for instance, and then he would be thinking, and then, oh, that's the way Master put it. One time I came up with a great insight that I still think is valid about a certain aspect of the energization exercises. And I'm not going to tell you because I'm going to tell you the rest of the story. So I had this insight, and then I went and I said to Swamiji, you know, I had this insight about the energization exercises. And I told him what I thought was one of the purposes of them. And all Swami said was, that's not the way Master's taught it. And that was enough. Because what he was, behind that was a lot of teaching. One of the things that he was saying is, if you start intruding your own insights into Master's teachings and how he gave them, then you're going to dilute the teachings of Master, and you're going to give permission to everybody else to add their insights to your insights, and then the next generation will add their delusive insights, and pretty soon the purity of the original teachings will be gone. He said, that isn't the way Master taught it. And so he was constantly bringing us back to attunement with Master. And so that training by Swamiji was on a daily basis. And he would, when he would write, one time we were with him just this last year in February was the last time we saw him in the body. And someone came and said to him that they had just visited a place that Master had been, and asked Swamiji if he had been there. And Swamiji said, oh yes, I was there, of course. And this person said, well, didn't you feel Master there? And Swamiji kind of looked quizzically, and he said, not especially. I feel Master all the time everywhere. Why should I feel him more there? But it was that, in little ways, him saying kind of over and over again, my mind is constantly dwelling around Master and thoughts of Master. One time, 2 or 3 years ago, we were with him and we were walking around the garden at his home at Crystal Hermitage, which he loved to do. He loved his home there in the garden because he loved beauty, and it had his own vibration. And so we would walk around, and that's the way he would get his exercise. And at one point he stopped, and he said, oh, That's what he meant. And we said, what, Swamiji? He said, I was remembering the time that I was with Master. Now this was 2 years ago, let's say, so let's say that it was in 2010. I'm not sure of the time that this happened, but the last time he saw Master was nearly 60 years before that. And so this incident, he was remembering something that had happened 60 years ago. And it was enough to stop him in his tracks and for him to say, oh, that's what he meant. Now that's what it means being in tune with Master, is that the mind is constantly, the daily events, the things that go on, the insights we have, constantly referencing it to what happened with the guru-disciple relationship. And what he said, in fact, was, I just remembered an incident where Master was giving some advice to someone, and he was looking at them. But then he just glanced and he raised an eyebrow, glanced in my direction and raised an eyebrow. And I just realized that from that glance and from that raise of an eyebrow, that advice was being given to me, not to that other person. And so, see, his mind was constantly dwelling on Master. For us, we don't have the direct relationship with Master. So it's hard for us to have that. Many of you don't have that much of a direct relationship, even with Swamiji. And those of us who have are fortunate in it. But that's not the key thing. The key thing is that we keep referencing everything back to God, because Master represented God for Swamiji. And so Swamiji kept referencing everything that happened back to the reference of God, because he knew that through that, it didn't matter what he accomplished, it mattered what he became, and what he wanted to become was so in tune with God and Guru that there was no difference. He said to us at one time, I used to ask Master to guide every thought, but I realized that that wasn't enough. Then I asked Master not only to guide every thought, but to guide every feeling, to guide every action, everything that I do, I wanted to be guided by Master. And he said, and then the time came when I couldn't really tell where Swami Kriyananda left off and Master started. So that relationship was Swamiji and his Guru, Master. But for each of us, we have to gradually develop that same relationship with however God has come to us in our lifetime. And we have to begin more and more to reference everything that we do, everything that we feel, everything that we think. We have to reference that back and basically ask, is this in tune with you, God? Because attunement, having God flow through us, is ultimately the whole of the spiritual path, the getting out of the sense that we're separate from God who's flowing through us. And that's the primary thing that Swamiji did for us. The secondary thing that he did, because these were the two driving forces of his life. So the first was the whole of life is a search for God. Because that's what he said. The two things that mattered to me, I wanted to find God. So the whole of everything that's important that we do has to be referenced to our search for God. And then secondly, he said the other thing was I wanted to share God with everyone. And so Master gave him the specific ways that he was supposed to do that. But for each of us, we will have some aspect of our life where we can share what we have been given with other people. It may be in terms of teaching, but it may just be in terms of kindness. There are many of the greatest souls at Ananda are not teachers. They don't have the facility to verbalize easily and come up with ideas and stories, but they're saints of action, or they're saints of kindness, or they just live their life in such a way that life is of great benefit to other people and to the world around them. And so, whatever we do in life, our service in life, if we can think that we aren't doing this because we want to do it or we need to do it, but we're doing it out of a sense of being a channel of God, and that God is actually doing that action through us. That's the second great thing that Swamiji trained us in. And so our life has been shaped not just by Swamiji, but by those two primary flows of energy, flows of consciousness that comprise Swamiji's life. And I must say it's been a very, very beautiful life and a beautiful gift that he has given us. But please understand, it is not personal to Devi and me or those who knew him. This is a teaching to everyone. And the more we get in tune with that, the happier and more spiritually successful our lives will be.
Good morning, everyone. I also want to thank you for coming. And I'll share some thoughts also about our years with Swami Kriyananda. Over the years, sometimes Swamiji would be invited to speak at a conference of other spiritual teachers or well-known New Age writers. And sometimes we would find that these speakers or writers had one essential talk that they gave, and whatever the opportunity came for them to share with others, they would give that one talk. Or there was a woman who was a well-known New Age writer in America, and she wrote a number of very popular and well-received books. And she said to Swami once, well, you know, they're all just the same. I kind of changed the title, but they're all essentially the same. Well, in Swamiji's life, there was a constant evolution in everything that he did. He said he never wrote a word in a book or composed a melodic line in a song that he didn't feel absolutely sincere about. And so it was always what was appropriate in that moment. Not, well, what do I always do? What's popular? What does my public expect? He said once, this was probably about 20 years ago, someone had praised him for his writing and said, oh, what a wonderful writing style you have. People so enjoy it. And he said the next morning when he sat down to write, he thought, oh, well, I can't let my readers down. I have to really do a good job today. And when he thought that way, he said, I couldn't write a word. And then he laughed. And of course, that was another great gift, that he had to laugh at himself and not to take himself too seriously. And he said, as soon as I thought I'm doing this for what people think about it, I couldn't at all feel a flow of inspiration. So I threw that thought away. You know, speaking of laughing at himself, shortly after Swamiji came to India in 2003, he was giving a talk in Gargal at a big hotel there, in a big room. And just as Nayaswami Vijay did at the beginning, someone stood up and said, please turn off your cell phones. And so most people did. There's always some that don't, but most people did. And in the middle of a talk, Swamiji's talk, someone's phone went off. And he said, please, we've asked you to turn your phones off. Please turn your phone off. And the phone kept ringing and ringing. And then he got a little bit peeved. Some of you may have been there. I see you nodding. And then he said, please, whoever that, I'm trying to give a lecture here, and I can't with that phone going off. And then he stopped, and he realized it was his phone in his pocket. And he took it out, and fortunately, someone captured that moment. And he just laughed and laughed. And I think for many people, that's all we remember of the whole lecture. I don't know what the discourse was. I don't know what he... I humbly admit I don't remember exactly what he said, but I remember that total humility and childlike joy and just the ability to laugh at himself. But what I witnessed in watching Swami's life for many decades was the evolution of his consciousness in everything that he did. And so we talked about the things that Master told him to do, instructed him to do. He told him to lecture. And when I first came to Swamiji, I met him in 1969, and I don't think I have ever heard a more brilliant and more inspiring lecture than he was. He had a very fine education, a classical education. He spoke many languages and read other languages. Oh, I thought that was someone's cell phone. But he would weave science and art and history and literature and philosophy, and he would tie it all together in this most amazing way. And he'd go out on these tangents, and I would think, how is he ever going to bring that back to the point he started with? And he always would. And I'm someone who loves words. And I kept a little notebook because he would always use at least one word that I didn't know what it meant. And so I finally started keeping a little notebook, and I would write down the words that Swami would use, and I would look them up. And they were beautiful words, ineluctable and coalescing and just poetic, beautiful words. But that was how I first heard him lecture. But then as he evolved as a soul, as he evolved in his consciousness, his lecturing changed. And you can even hear it in his voice. His voice slowed down, became deeper, more melodic. And then he would less and less weave in all these subtle ideas, because for those of us who have read The New Path, Swamiji said, when I first came to Master, I had intellectual pride, and Master tried to break me of that, and in many ways, and praised him for his devotion. Most of us probably know the wonderful story when Swamiji was at 29 Palms with Master at his desert retreat in California, and one evening, word was sent to Swamiji. Swami and the other monks lived a little distance away in a little pretty ramshackle house. If you ever get to see it, Master's house was a little bit nicer, but in a very remote desert area. We visited these places now. And so one evening, word was sent to Swamiji that Master wanted him to come over to his apartment. So Swami very excitedly did. And Master had a little brown paper bag, and he told Swami to turn out the lights. Swami didn't know what was going on. And then he got out of the bag one of those little children's spark guns that when you shoot it, little sparks fly out. And then he heard Master kind of chuckling, and then in the darkened room, he started shooting out these many-colored sparks, sort of like Diwali, all the sparklers that the children play with. And Master was laughing and laughing, and then he got something else, and then he told Swami to turn on the lights, and he got something else out of the bag, and it was another little gun, but you shot it, and a little man with a toy parachute came floating down to the ground. And Swamiji said Master looked at it with great concentration and gravity as it slowly descended. And then Master looked at Swamiji and said, "What do you think, Walter?" And Swami, being very intellectual, well-educated, he just said, "They're very nice, sir." He didn't know what to say. And Master looked at him very profoundly, and he said, "Suffer little children," quoting Christ in the Bible, "suffer little children to come unto me, for as such is the kingdom of heaven." And he was trying to get Swamiji out of his brilliancy and of his mind into the more profound wisdom of his heart. And that's what you see in the evolution of Swami's lectures. By the end of his life, his lectures were so simple and so deep. And all he really talked about was when he met Master, what led him to picking up the autobiography. And he told the story over and over, and you could feel that that was the most important thing in his life. And once someone said to him in the last years, "But Swami, you tell a lot of the same stories over and over again." And Swami said, "That's the most important thing to me now, just the remembrance of my time with Master." And so that watching that beautiful evolution from a brilliant mind to a heart that was totally surrendered in God to the Guru, and what he shared with us was a teacher, was to try to get us to understand the mind is not that important, but the heart is all important. And he led us step by step down that journey. And now I still have my little notebooks with all the words that I learned from Swami, and I think it's just the least important part of what he shared with us. And then, so he was a lecturer, but then he also, we see the evolution of him as a writer. And this is interesting because when he first started writing, he was, one can see the evolution here too. He was somewhat constrained. He was trying not to insert himself into what he wrote, but only Master's teachings. And it was like he hadn't found his own voice as a writer. But I think the turning point was when he wrote, this was in 1975, came out, 76, excuse me, the first version, The Path. It became later The New Path. He edited it somewhat. But in writing that book, he realized, I can share from my own voice. I can share Yoganandaji with the world, and I don't have to be afraid to do this. And from that pivotal book, hundreds of other books came forth, and each one was different. Each one was like a facet of a diamond on education and success and money magnetism and relationships and finding happiness and hope for a better world and communities. And it was as though he found Master's voice coming through him. And then there was nothing that interfered. And towards the end of his life, it was very interesting to watch him write, because it was almost not writing the way I do it, at least, the way most of us do it, where we have concepts, we try to frame them into words and structure that others can understand. But for Swamiji, it was as though it was almost as though consciousness was coming through him and then appearing in a book. And it was effortless. He wrote the biography of Yogananda in a couple of weeks. And it wasn't like he was working at it. It just flowed through him. And so to see that evolution again, moving from the difficulty of how do I express these teachings, how can I put them clearly, into finding his own connection with the words that his guru taught him. And I think for us, the culmination at the end of his life came with when he wrote the essence of the Bhagavad Gita. Jyotish and I were visiting him in Garbham at the time, and he was so sweet because he wanted us to stay in his home. There were many rooms, but there wasn't any empty room because his staff was all staying there. So he built a little, on the roof, a little screen porch, and that's where we lived. We called it the bird cage because it was just open, and it was noisy and a lot of pollution, and the diesel generator was right next to it, and there was no sound protection, but we were absolutely delighted to be living there. And he was writing the Bhagavad Gita. And you know, he'd been wanting to do that for years because Master told him to write, work on his commentaries of the Gita, but he didn't have the manuscript. And then Master said, had a dream, shortly before he began writing. And Master said, don't forget the possibility of a skylight, meaning direct inspiration. And then he started writing. And this was, so 2007 it came out. It was 1950 when he was with Master working on that, so 57 years. And he said he remembered every single word Master said about every one of the slokas. And he just said it just poured through me. And that was the skylight. So watching that evolution of, again, first in the mind, and then letting the spirit flow through him. Another thing that I cherish so deeply about Swamiji was what he did as a leader and builder of communities throughout the world. And when I first met him, he was a man so clearly with a mission. I remember someone was asking us the other night how I first met Swami, and I had just arrived. I was to the Nanda village was just beginning, and I had gotten a ride from many thousands of miles to come, and I was standing there on a grassy area wondering, what do I do next? And then I felt this energy, and I hadn't met Swami. He hadn't written any books. I'd never heard him lecture or teach, but I felt this energy coming from behind me, and it was like this great wind that was blowing, and I thought, what is this? And then I turned around, and there was a modest man quietly standing there. I didn't even know who he was, but I just felt a great power and presence there. And then he said a few words very kindly to me, and then he kept walking, just of encouragement, just made me feel welcome, because I didn't know anybody when I came. And he made me feel welcome, and then he kept moving. And someone just happened to be standing there and said, that's Swami Kriyananda. But and you could feel a man with a mission who poured every ounce of his strength, his energy, his commitment, his creativity into building this community. And yet over the years, it evolved. And because of his great wisdom as a leader, he brought all of us along with him. And he trained hundreds of people in how to be good leaders, how to manifest projects, how to listen to other people's needs, how to empower your team. And he trained us. And there's a wonderful scene from, one of my favorite scenes from the great, great film Gandhi, where Gandhi is going on his march to the sea. And it starts off and it just shows him beginning the walk, and then the camera pans back and you see a few dozen people with him, and more and more and more until you look and there are hundreds and hundreds and finally thousands of people. Well, so it was with Swami. The force of his personality and his vision and mission was so great that it magnetized people from all over the world, but not only magnetized them, but trained them so that they too could be leaders, and gave us faith in ourselves We could teach, we could write, we could lead, we could help further the mission. And because of that, we have now an Ananda Sangha work throughout the world that is vibrant and dynamic and will not end with the passing of that great soul, that great spiritual light, because he had that expanded vision. So many leaders say, oh, well, I know what needs to happen, but I don't trust these other people. They're young, they're new, what do they know? If he had done that, the likelihood that Ananda would survive would be very small. But he had the wisdom to say, we must draw all these people. Anyone who has any shred of talent or interest or ability, get them into the act. And I think half of the projects he started was just to give people things to do. So we saw the evolution of his leadership. And then Swami, as a teacher, but also as a spiritual guide for all of us. He started off, and again, he was impersonal. He would give master's teachings. I think I probably heard him give, as Jyotish said, thousands of lectures. We probably have heard him give hundreds and hundreds of lectures simply on the Hong Sau technique. And that's how he would approach his spiritual guidance. But then more and more, he saw that people needed a personal face, someone who cared for them to walk the spiritual path. And he realized that simply giving the teachings and then saying goodbye, good luck, was not enough. And so he was there for us in our failures, in our confusion, in our mistakes, and he guided us forward. And he never judged, and he never criticized, and he cheered us on. There was a man, this is a funny story, but he came to Swami. For those of you who know a little bit about American culture, there are these motorcycle gangs called Hell's Angels. So a man came to Swamiji, and he had been a member of Hell's Angels, and he had tattoos and hair out to here and very rough looking. And he came to Swami and he said, I read Autobiography of a Yogi and I want to follow Yogananda. And to be honest, I'll tell you the whole story. He said, I went to that other organization, Self-Realization Fellowship. They wouldn't even let me in the door. And he said, and I wasn't wearing chains and leather. I was dressed like a regular citizen. But Swami welcomed him in. And he gave him things to do. And he accepted him as a child. And he saw that even though he'd done some bad things in his life, he was a sincere devotee. But then this man's bad karma caught up with him. And he began to criticize Swami and say negative things about Swami, and he left Ananda. And then one beautiful summer day, Swami was giving a lecture outside in what we call the Temple of Trees. And Swami gave this man the name Ram Leela, God's play, because he certainly represented that. There were hundreds of people sitting outside. Swami was giving a wonderful discourse. And all of a sudden, at the back of the crowd, there stood Ram Leela. And Swami stopped the lecture, and he said, Ram Leela, come here. And this was a man who, had gotten into big gang fights and all that. He said, come here. And he sort of shamefacedly walked up and he said, you've been a bad boy. And he took his hair and he kind of shook it and he said, don't do that anymore. And Ram Leela said, I won't, Swami, I'm sorry. And he never did. His life took him elsewhere, but he knew that Swami cared about him, and that forgiveness and that acceptance and that love was what gave him, and hundreds of us, the ability to keep walking on the spiritual path and to say, I can do this because someone has taken the time to let me know they care about my spiritual progress and my spiritual efforts. And finally, Swamiji, the evolution of Swamiji as a disciple. And for me, I think this was the most beautiful to observe. Because again, when he first started, when we first met him, it was so clear that he was a disciple of Master, that he kept it very close to his chest. He didn't tell personal stories. Because, you know, at that point, when we met him, it was shortly after he had been, he was thrown out of Self-Realization Fellowship, and he wasn't sure. He wasn't sure if he had the right to represent Master. And so he kept it very close. But then little by little, just as in his writing and all the things he did, he began letting that presence of Master, that discipleship flow through him until finally, as we said, he said, I don't know anymore where Swami Kriyananda ends and Yogananda begins. And you would look in his eyes sometimes at the end of years, we would walk into his apartment, into his living room, and he'd just be sitting on the chair, in his lounge chair, and sometimes he would be, his eyes would be closed, or sometimes he would just be looking out at the window. And you could see he was absolutely absorbed in the bliss of Master, of Gurudeva. And Master said to him, God won't come to you till the end of life. Death will be your final sacrifice. And meaning that he would have to continue the work Master had given him until the very end. And then when it was done, then he would be embraced and merged into God. And really I have to say that for most of us, when Swami passed, there weren't many tears shed. How could there be? How could there be? When we knew that he had found the fruition of all of his life's efforts, of all of that incarnation, and all we could do was rejoice for what he had accomplished in this lifetime. And not, as Jyotish was saying, not what he accomplished outwardly, but the transformation that he was able to bring about in the hearts of thousands of people throughout the world. We met a man recently who lives in Mumbai, and he only met Swamiji a few times, but he said the first time I saw him, he looked at me with so much love. He said, my parents loved me because they had to. I was their child. My wife loved me, sort of. My children love me because I'm their father. But he said, when Swami looked at me, it was a love without cause, without condition. And I have never known that kind of love in my life. He only met him a few times, but he said, I will never, ever forget him. So we just encourage all of you, this great light has come into our life, Gurudeva and his disciple Swamiji, and such a wealth, such a doorway, a wealth of spiritual abundance, such a broad doorway to walk through towards spiritual growth. And I urge each one of you, read his books, listen to his lectures, try to draw inspiration and guidance and direction, because I believe he is more present with those of us who are serving Master, those of us who are living the spiritual life, more present now than ever before.
I was wondering about if you've given the advice on practicing meditation with Nishkam Karma, because it seems sometimes like you're doing it for your own benefit, but how can you do that without involving the ego?
Okay. The question is how to practice meditation with Nishkam Karma so that you aren't essentially being a merchant in your meditation. I'll meditate this much, but you give me back something, whether that's realization or power or fix my problem. Swami used to laugh and say people would come to him and say, "Oh, I practiced meditation so deeply this morning that I was able to get a parking place in downtown San Francisco." So there is this tendency to meditate but not be absorbed in the meditation itself, rather be thinking, "I'll give you this much, God, if you'll give me something back from that." And how to overcome that, because we won't, how to put it, we will gain things back through meditation anyway. But if we do the meditation in order to gain things back, we'll only get a tiny portion of it, because we'll get the things, we won't get the realization, the freedom. What we really want to do in meditation, if possible, is to become absorbed in the object of our meditation. That's really one could say our goal right now is to become concentrated and absorbed in whatever we're meditating on. So let's say that we're meditating using the Hong Saw technique. The goal of meditation should be to be so absorbed in watching the breath and doing the mantra and focusing at the point between the eyebrows, that deep concentration means that all the other thoughts that disturb the mind just gradually dissipate, and all we're thinking about is the breath and concentrating here. But if we're trying to do that and thinking, now I'm going to use this power of concentration to get ahead at work, maybe we will be able to get ahead at work, but if we think about that when we're supposed to be concentrating on Hong Saw, we won't go deep in Hong Saw. And so the object of meditation for us at this point is to become completely absorbed in the meditation itself, so that the restless mind dissipates and doesn't bother us. And from that will come all of this spiritual uplifted consciousness and all of the attainments that come from uplifted consciousness that we're after. But if we go after the attainments, we never get the uplifted consciousness. Now, in order to get to the point of deeply concentrated mind, it depends on the flow of prana in the body. This is Patanjali's Eightfold Path that I won't start at the beginning, but first there's pranayama, and that we have many, many techniques of pranayama on our path. In fact, Hong Saw is a technique of pranayama. We might not think of it that way, but the very mantra itself, the bija mantra Hong and Saw, is meant to help the subtle prana in the spine become regularized. And so Hong Saw is a technique of pranayama. So if we go deeper and deeper in pranayama and then achieve enough withdrawal of energy, then our senses will also begin to withdraw, like it happens in deep sleep at night. But we're awake during this time. So that withdrawal of energy happens, and then we can concentrate more deeply. So pranayama, pratyahara, and then the first step of concentration is dharana, followed by dhyana. Well, that should be the goal for us, is to try to achieve dhyana. But if we don't do it by just focusing on whatever the object of the meditation itself is, we won't achieve that state. And so that nishkam karma has to be there, because if we don't do the act purely, we won't achieve the result of the act. And so nishkam karma the essence of that teaching is to do the act itself without worrying about the fruits of the act. And it's usually applied outwardly to serve purely without worrying about what you get back as nishkam karma. But it also deeply applies to meditation. Don't meditate with the thought of what am I going to get back from this? Not even realization. Just concentrate deeply, because if we're focused on what we get back, I'm going to concentrate in order to get realized, we'll be thinking about what we're supposed to get back, and we won't be thinking about we won't be deeply concentrated. So it's quite subtle, but it's a very, very important point and an important thing to realize. Just when we meditate, do your very best to concentrate as completely on whatever you're doing at the time you're doing it as possible. And that certainly includes Kriya Yoga for those of you who have them.
So I'll also add some thoughts. You know, the other day we were having a discussion with a few people, and one of them had had very profound experiences in meditation, and the other one who had been meditating about the same length of time in their life hadn't had any experiences. And yet I was very happy that she had the confidence to say, because this first person was saying, I have all these incredible experiences, and then the second person said, gee, I haven't had any of those experiences, but I feel so much more alive, I feel so much more joyful, I feel so much more loving than I ever have in my life. And my children and my husband all say I'm a very different person. And so we need to understand that, in fact, Swamiji gave some wonderful talks on what are the signs of spiritual progress. And if you're only going after experiences, and not to belittle experiences, that's wonderful if you have them, but there are other signs that show you that you're having an effective meditation. And that's how you live your life, with greater calmness. This woman who was saying she hasn't had experiences said, my life was just totally dry. I felt like there was nothing in life that gave me joy or fulfillment. And then I began meditating. And she said, now a little sip of tea is just the most wonderful experience for me. Looking at a tree, I can see the beauty and the divine consciousness in that tree. And so sometimes if we only define what we're doing in meditation as what happens when we're sitting in our meditation asana, then we are selling ourselves short, because it should be a total transformation of consciousness. And if we get too focused on, I've done this many kriyas and still haven't, gone into the spiritual eye, then we get discouraged and we may even stop. But if we just say, if we can recognize that the quality of my life is much improving, then that gives us the encouragement to keep practicing meditation. So, other questions? Each I thought.
No, I've got one, yes. So, friendship and the way that you experienced friendship with Kriyanandaji. Swamiji talked about how Master was personal, but he was impersonal too. They go side by side. And you're sort of walking a tightrope because you don't want to go too far away one way or the other. And it's connected to how we should relate to each other. And so if you could share a little bit on that.
Okay, so Vijay asked the question, we'll just repeat it for the recording, about the quality of friendship that Swamiji shared with us and how, by extension, we can share that with each other. I think it was, first of all, based on very profound respect for each individual. you may have heard us tell this, but sometimes he would walk into a room and he would say, "Good morning, all you great souls." And he would genuinely mean it. And when first time he did that, I kind of looked around to see if some great souls had come in, and it was just us. And I thought, well, I guess we're the ones he's talking about. But starting with profound respect for the innate spirituality and wisdom and divinity of each individual soul. And I don't think I ever heard Swami sarcastic, ever once, kind of belittling somebody. It wasn't that he didn't see people's faults. Of course he did. He saw our faults more clearly than we saw them ourselves. But he just put that aside. Once one of the people that he had assigned as a leader to a certain aspect of Ananda, this person wasn't a natural leader, and he kind of wanted, he liked the leadership because it gave him kind of power over other people. But Swami was giving him the benefit of the doubt to see if he could rise above those lesser qualities and really see leadership as a service position. So Jyotish and I went to visit this area. It was not at Ananda Village, it was elsewhere, where this person was leading. And as soon as we got there was like a beeline to our door saying, can we talk? Because everyone had complaints about this person as a leader and what a poor job they were doing and how they were on a power trip. And so then we got back to Ananda Village, and Swami said, well, how was your visit? And we said one word. We said, well, and he said, I don't want to hear about it. He did not let us say one negative word, and that was the end of the conversation. And sometime later, he shifted that person out, but he didn't, out of respect for that person and not wanting us to gossip and be negative about others, he would not let us talk about that. And so I think it's a very good question, Vijay, because the love and friendship he gave us, I mean, just as Christ said in the Bible, even as I have loved you, you should love one another. And so it is, even as Swami saw the highest in each one of us. That was one of his greatest teachings. We need to see that in each other.
I think one of the keynotes of friendship is that you want good things to happen for your friends. You want them to be successful, you want them to be happy, you want them to, whatever, you just want good things to happen. And Swami never made a division line in which he didn't want good things to happen to a person. So everybody in the world, he wanted to have something good happen. So many times, people have divisions. This person is my friend, and that person is not my friend. And I want good things to happen to my friends, but I don't want good things to happen to the others. Or even worse, I want bad things to happen to them. And we divide the world into things that we like and things that we don't like, people that we like, people that we don't like. Swami simply wanted good to happen to everybody, absolutely everybody. And he acted that way. So he would go into a store and he would meet a stranger. He would meet the proprietor of the store. And it might be the very first time that he ever met that person. But he would begin giving them energy because he wanted to give energy. He wanted to have a friendship happen. He wanted good things to happen. He would often buy something from the store, but more as an excuse to strike up a little friendship with that person. And so he just cared about people. And so, again, another aspect of friendship that we typically think of is whether we're compatible with people, whether the personalities are like, and whether we like being with somebody. And Swami had a personality, and there were some people that got along easily with that personality, and others that didn't, but that did not stop Swami from loving everyone the same. So there were some people that got totally frozen around Swamiji. You know, one time, somebody, it was as if they didn't know what to say to Swamiji, and Swamiji was taking some photographs, and had taken photographs quite a bit, and this person was awkward around him. So he said, "Swami, have you ever thought of using a tripod for your camera?" And I mean, it's like saying to somebody who's an author, "Have you ever thought of using the alphabet in your books?" You know, and Swami just kind of looked and said, "John, of course I have." But it was with friendship that he said that. It wasn't like, "Oh, you idiot," you know, because he saw that the problem was not in the question, the problem was in that this fellow felt awkward around him. And so in his little way, he was just trying to put him at ease. "John, of course I am." You know, and so John relaxed a little bit and got over that for a while. But some people were compatible with Swamiji. Swamiji had a lot of knowledge and a lot of creativity, and so he tended to be able to relate more easily with people with creativity, but he never didn't relate with everybody on their own terms. So friendship for him was personal only slightly, but primarily impersonal. Primarily just, he was like the sun that gave out rays, and as Master said in his teachings, that if we go out to sunbathe and we consciously draw from the sun, then we can receive 10 times as much benefit as if we just lay there passively. And so those people who consciously drew on Swami's friendship got more, but Swami was like the sun. He gave it out to everyone. It was up to others whether they drew on it or not. So it was interesting, personal and impersonal. And those who didn't understand that, some of them felt kind of left out because others spent more time with Swamiji. But honestly, it was not about who spent the most time. Swami was the friend to all the world.
Maybe one more question.
Okay, one more question. Oh, now we're getting going here.
Last days of his in this world, what was his special passage to whom and what he said? And was he in pain when he had his last breath?
I didn't quite understand that.
About Swamiji,
Yeah.
Swamiji's last days.
Uh,
Last message and last talk to whom?
Swami's last message,
To
he was quite withdrawn in his last week, but he did two things, speaking of friendship and impersonal friendship. One, he made a special trip, even though he was very weak and very tired in his last days. And he made a special trip. He was living in Assisi. He made a special trip into town because there were 4 or 5 stores that he would often go to because he had become friends with the proprietor. And he went to each of those stores and just shared a little time with those people. Now, these were not people that were going to help with the mission. They were not people that were particularly deep friends. They weren't devotees. They were just impersonal friends that Swamiji had. And he went basically to say goodbye to those people. Then he also had a little tea where he asked some of the close people in Assisi to come and spent a half hour with them or so on, and that was the last kind of public interaction. Other than that, he was kind of drawing more and more inwardly. But the last action that he did before he passed away was to go to his computer and see whether there was email, because people would write him, ask him advice, and that was one of the ways that he gave energy. So he went to his computer and checked the email, saw that there was no letter that he needed to answer. And he came to the breakfast table and very shortly after that, within a half hour, passed away.
And his nurse, Miriam, if you knew her, his nurse said she thinks he probably passed from a stroke. So it wasn't with pain, and he went very quickly. Okay, there was a question.
What can we do as parents to support our children to be part of the spiritual path? Any specific guidance, maybe your experience with Ananda Sangha in US, anything specific that you're doing for children?
What can we do, question is, what can we do for our children to help them be part of the path? I think the most important thing is our own example, your own sincere spiritual seeking. And that makes a deep, I think with children, they watch their parents very closely, and they watch the difference between what we say and what we do. And you can say, oh, you should be a good person, you should meditate every day, you should love God. But if you're not doing it yourselves, then it won't make a deep impact. So I think the first thing is to have your own life be based on the spiritual path, devotion, living a righteous dharmic life, serving to others, not just thinking of your own needs, of your own family. We have some friends in Los Angeles, a woman and her 2 daughters, and they're people with some means, financial means, but the mother has raised them very simply, and whenever they get their allowance, she said, let's go and let's share that, and with the homeless people. So they'll go out and they'll give away their little weekly allowance. So being an example of serving others. Then I think also making sure the environment in your home is a spiritual one. To not have the television on all the time, not be watching movies that are not uplifting, but to have time as a family where you're reading spiritual books that the children can understand, where you're having, maybe do the puja together, maybe meditate together. In our schools at Ananda Village and elsewhere, even with the little preschool children, before they're kindergarten age, they have what they call quiet bodies. That's what the teacher calls it. She said, now let's have quiet bodies. And they're meditating. They relax, they concentrate at the spiritual eye, just for a few minutes. But then they're restless and active. But just to give them a little taste of quietness and interiorization. It's nice to be listening to uplifting music and things that bhajans, kirtans, other things that have that vibration in the house. And then to, when you read autobiography of a yogi, the master said how his mother, who was a great, great saint, how she would always instruct the children from examples, stories from the scriptures. And so be aware that our children are come to us, and their souls have had many, many experiences before they come to us in this lifetime. But they do come in part for our training. And so to look at the qualities in your children, maybe positive and negative. Like with this woman, she saw her children had an altruistic nature, so she would have them go give their allowance to the homeless people. But if there are negative traits in them, maybe they have anger, then find ways, uncontrollable anger, find ways that you can get them to channel that. But the other day I was visiting the home of a friend, and their adolescent son walked in, and he was wearing his muddy athletic shoes. And I watched this thing happen. The father said, in kind of a monotone, take off your muddy shoes, take off your muddy shoes, take off your muddy shoes. And the little boy just walked through the house, tracking mud all through the house, and never listened to his father, and then out the door. And I thought, why waste the words if you're not going to really put energy behind them? The father should have stopped. He should have said, we don't wear our dirty shoes in the house. Turn around now and go out and take them. So we have to put energy into creating patterns for our children, but if we just kind of have kind of a quiet dialogue in the background, they'll not listen to us, and then we lose the ability to discipline them. So they have to know we mean what we say. And if we ask them to do something, they need to respect that and live up to that. And teach them, and this is something that you have in India so much more than we have in the West, respect for elders, respect for teachers, respect for, extended family. And that's such an important and beautiful thing. And to kindle that as well. So these are some ideas.
Just a couple of thoughts. Too often we think that spirituality is about imposing that which has been meaningful to us on our children. And that doesn't work very well. It's much better to kind of pull back and really try to meditate on and think deeply about each one of your children and see what their tendencies are and how you can bring their own innate tendencies to the highest expression that they have. So our son, for instance, is not devotional at all. And we never tried to force devotion on him because he would just rebel whenever we tried. And he couldn't understand really our devotion. Now he's finally beginning to understand it. But what he did have was a very serviceful nature, a very dharmic nature, and so that's what we encouraged. Even as a high school student, he was in 10th or 11th grade in high school. He used to go because there was an old man that he had met who had a little farm or a little piece of property, and this man was old enough so that he couldn't take care of it well. And our son, at this time he was 16 or 17 years old, he would go and spend his Saturdays helping do chores for this old man. And he would come back and tell us about what he had done and so on. So we encouraged him in that direction more than in, you should do this devotional practice, or you should chant, or you should, because he would have just rebelled. So look at your children, find what their natural expression is, and then help them bring that to the highest. So make it altruistic, make it high-minded, make it connected with God. Much more so, I would say, in India than in America. Children, the culture is innately more devotional. And so if the child has any interest in chanting, help them play the harmonium, or help them play drums, or help them do some chanting. But a little step at a time like that. But the real point I'm making here is tune into their nature. Don't just impose your nature onto them.